one of Ramsey's chief projects was to make bioethics and our issues approachable in a language and in a way that the everyman can embrace. That's sort of why we have focused on filmmaking in the last few years, to sort of tell the stories and explicitly tie our issues, and particularly in the area of reproductive technology, with particular faces and names and real-life experiences. And so tonight I'd like to invite up Jennifer Lahl and Jessica Kern. They're going to engage in an on-stage interview for you to hear Jessica's story. Over the past 2 years, Jessica has courageously shared her story with us. Jessica is I won't steal too much of her thunder, but she is a child born from commercial surrogacy. And she's found us and allowed us to tell her story, and we've done it through film. A few years ago, in commenting on our work, Dr. Robert George of Princeton said that no one has been more determined or fearless than Jennifer Lahl in fighting against the exploitation of women in assisted reproduction. She's a modern-day Joan of Arc. I can't begin to say how deeply I appreciate her work and witness. So tonight you're going to see that witness firsthand, and also the witness of Jessica Kern. So the floor is yours, ladies. Take it away.
Great. Thank you. This is the side of the practical bioethics that we really love doing. I mean, I often tell people that it's a story war. And we have competing stories, and so our job is to tell our stories, and hopefully to tell it really well. And to tag on to John's comments about connecting and meeting and how we all are working together. I remember Jessica and I were talking on the phone a few weeks back, sort of preparing for our time together tonight, and she reminded me how we met. And I actually was in Italy getting ready to show an Italian translation of exploitation when in my phone popped up an email. At the time I didn't realize who it was from, but it was from Jessica. And she was watching a rerun of a Dr. Oz program that I had done on, the topic of the Dr. Oz program is 40 too old to have a baby? So it was all about assisted reproductive technology that allows much older women now to have a baby. And Jessica, I will invite you in now to say, what was it about that program that you saw and made you reach out and email me?
So what grabbed me most was that Jennifer was putting herself out there in a position that's not terribly popular. Most people want to say, go make your family, and however you do it, that's wonderful. But she was really speaking towards the real issues. How do we prevent infertility to start with? But also the big question that everyone misses in this is, what about the children? What are their rights and all that stuff? And she was the first person I've ever seen in a public arena actually speak towards the women and the children. Because IVF branches into the surrogacy issues as well.
Yeah. So tell the audience who hasn't seen Breeders, a subclass of women, tell us a little about your story and how you came to be here on the earth.
Okay, so I'm a product of a traditional surrogacy, which means that my birth mother is also my biological mother. And she entered into an arrangement with my biological father and adoptive mother for $10,000 and gave me over to them. So that's the quick run of it. Yeah.
Sure. But so that's how you came to be here. So tell us how you came to find out about that, because you didn't know it, obviously, as a newborn baby coming home from the hospital, that a contract and money had changed hands. So at what point in your life did you find this out?
So I had some glaring hints, as my adoptive mother was trying to pass herself off as my biological mother, but she's South Korean and I'm obviously not. So, there was obviously questions. By the time I hit high school, something was off. But senior year of high school, I came across some medical records that told my story, that, patient is a product of a surrogacy, that patient's father is patient's biological father, but patient's mother is, biological mother is a surrogate. So I got a pretty, straight to the point paragraph in my medical records that informed me of my story, which as a product of surrogacy or as a donor conceived person, I have no right to that information. So luck of the draw that I got to read it.
And you, once you found this out, you went to your father.
I actually waited until I was out of the home before I approached him on it, because I didn't want to stir the pot and have him going after anyone for me finding my own records.
And that's kind of common, that secrets. And,
Yes.
and talk a little bit about growing up and how you sort of didn't feel like you fit in or belonged in this.
Well, even before I was able to realize that you can't, you know, be half Korean when you're obviously Caucasian. You know, if I jump ahead to when I was fortunate enough to find my birth mom at 26, and when I found her, there was this immediate shock of, wait, I resemble this person, I have their sense of humor and all this stuff that I was never connected to in the house that I grew up in. So somewhere inside there's a knowledge that you're missing that connection. But because you have never had the connection, you don't know what that thing is that you're missing. It takes finding it later to realize what that is.
And so when you first found your birth mother, it was a pretty happy experience.
Definitely.
And what happened since then?
So the initial meeting was great. We all got along great, but there were some issues. Like, one thing that people really don't consider when it comes to surrogacy, and typically a woman who's a surrogate is someone who's had successful pregnancies of her own. So you have children of the surrogate who watch their mom keep some children, give some away. In my own birth mother situation, she kept the first two, gave up the next three, and kept the last one. And all of us are her biological children. So there were some issues for one of my older siblings that there wasn't enough love to go around, and it kind of came down to a he or I situation, or she or I. But then also, because I've chosen to speak out against surrogacy, the majority of her family chooses not to maintain a relationship with me, because as a product of donor conception, you're just supposed to be grateful, and if you don't fall into that line, there's a consequence, which is why most people don't speak out. Most people don't voice their true opinions.
Yeah. And how do you find your relationship now with your adoptive mother?
Non-existent.
Yeah. And why do you think that is?
It's twofold. The connection never really developed, and when you base a relationship, even a parental one, on lies and mistrust, it's not a solid foundation. It further deteriorated when I found my birth mom. That insulted her greatly, that I would want to have a relationship with someone who wasn't her in a parental way. And there's this sense of, you know, we paid for you, you're our kid, you're not supposed to go out and seek anyone else, like what we say goes. So I betrayed her in my search for my birth mom, and I don't think she could deal with that.
And since we met and you agreed to be in the film, and we've done several movie screenings together and a lot of media together, what is your sense of how, apart from your family, just how people are they, do they tend to be sympathetic or supportive to you?
There's definitely an array. I find that most people outside of the family situation are pretty supportive. You know, there's a bit of ambivalence, especially when it comes to the 20-year-old crowd. But then there's a bit where you run across of people, well, you should just be grateful you're here. The whole concept of the disenfranchised grief, which fortunately people don't usually voice those opinions to my face too often, but Jennifer and I had experienced it at a DC councilman's hearing where, you know, I gave my story and the councilman's response was, well, you're here, you know, as if that makes it all okay and that we shouldn't look deeper into these issues.
Right, we were testifying together against a bill that would make commercial surrogacy legal in the District of Columbia. And the councilman who was the author of the bill and was, who actually just said that, and we were pretty stunned that he would have such little compassion or empathy into saying, well, shouldn't you be grateful for this technology that allowed you to be here? How do you now see yourself trying to navigate, because you have become outspoken, you've sort of become, there's not many like you, right? You're sort of a
Right.
lone ranger as far as a young woman born of this contract pregnancy. I mean, how do you see yourself navigating the public conversations, the media?
I wish that as much as I have been able to put myself out there, that I just had more energy and ability to throw myself out there more, like Elena Newman, who was here last year.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing is just to keep a presence out there at all. You know, I was fortunate to run into Jennifer, which connected me to a huge group of donor-conceived people, and I needed to get connected to them to validate my own experiences, because you just don't get the validation that, no, maybe there's something wrong with this. So I just want to keep myself out there and hope that I'm able to reach someone else like I was reached by the people around me.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think is wrong with it?
Wow. My goodness, there's so many issues. You know, starting with the women's rights issues, because as you always say, it's not Donald Trump's wife signing up volunteering to be a surrogate. There's obviously a financial incentive, and you know, starting from that down to the children's issues, we have so much evidence in adoption communities that it's detrimental to a child to separate them from their biology unless it's a necessity. But then we turn around and do it intentionally in this arena, and we're supposed to be grateful and all that stuff. But my goodness, the more you look into it, the more problems you find. You know, there's, on the outside looking in, it might look like it's just a couple, but it just gets nastier and nastier the deeper you look in it.
And tell the people the name of the blog that you maintain.
I have a blog called The Other Side of Surrogacy, and if you Google that, you can find it. And there's also a Facebook page by the same name.
And you call yourself a
Product of surrogacy.
A product of surrogacy. So there is that sense of being bought and sold.
My goodness, I mean, it's a huge human trafficking issue. It really is. Like, it boggles my mind that what differentiates human trafficking from surrogacy is when the document is signed. If you sign the document before the mother gets pregnant, it's surrogacy. If you sign it during the pregnancy, it's human trafficking. Those of us who are products of, do you think it matters to us when that form gets signed? It's the same actions happening.
So what are your thoughts? Like, this is an audience that's probably never heard a young woman like you speak. What do you want them to leave tonight thinking about or wondering about or questioning?
I had a good answer to this.
You did.
I would say the biggest thing is, you know, as this group always stresses, is just because we have the technology, should we be using it? Surrogacy has now been around over 30 years, and sperm donation much longer. There needs to be a way to put a pause and get some serious studies going, because I guarantee you whatever studies get done, if they're done on unbiased level, is going to show that this is not in the best interest of women, children, and families on so many levels.
And do you think you'll continue sort of your advocacy work in this space?
Definitely.
And what would you like to see happen here in the United States?
Surrogacy get a band, of course. Yeah. But I'd also like to see a general education that's, there's this attitude in the US, this commercialistic attitude where I find that if you speak to some of the other countries' groups, that you can explain the points of view and they're receptive to it all, but a lot of people I speak to here have this attitude of, well, it's a woman's right. So we're a very commercialized country, and I would love to see some education out there as to where people are a little more open-minded to hearing all the pros and cons and not just go, it's their right because there's a financial end to it.
Good. Well, thank you. You've been incredibly brave to not only tell your story, you know, here tonight, but to be on a film and to do all the media. And I know that it's cost you dearly as far as relationships with your moms. So thank you.
But Jennifer is truly the brave one, puts herself out there every day at an unpopular point of view.
We're in it together.
Without having to do it.
We're in it together. Thank you.
Thank you.